Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Joanna Coles and Arianna Huffington.
Okay, so I'm Joanna, this is Arianna. Let's start with a show of hands. And this perhaps might be an atypical question because I'm sure most of the people here were also at the ASME Awards last night. But who here had 8 hours sleep? Okay, okay, like 5 hands. All right, who had between 6 and 7 hours sleep? Okay, and who had less than 6 hours sleep? Okay, this is a room that needs Arianna's new book. And I will tell you, when this book came across my desk, I was seriously, oh my God, Arianna's written a book now telling us to sleep more. And then I actually read the book, and the science is so compelling that what we wanted to do today was turn this into a bit of a lifestyle service section. And I hope that out of everything you hear today and that you heard yesterday, this will remain the single most useful information you will hear about how you live your actual life and how you run your business. So start telling us about the science and the difference between having 8 hours sleep and having 6 hours sleep, because it's really considerable.
Well, what is amazing is that the science of sleep is very new. So just to give you an idea, in 1970, we had the creation of the first scientific center on sleep in Stanford. And now we have 2,500. So it's exploded. And what we have found is that sleep, as Patrick Fuller, sleep scientist at Harvard, has said, is of the brain, for the brain, by the brain. So all these brainiacs, all these type personalities in this room need to realize that sleep is a performance enhancement tool. So we need to get away from the idea that sleep is for people who want to chill under a mango tree. Winners are going to basically be like Donald Trump and Ted Cruz competing with each other, who got the less sleep, which is basically another way for men to compete whose is bigger. And, you know, I'm with Joanna, so there's going to be a lot of sex talk. What can I do? She brings it out of me. So the bottom line is that, for me, one of the most impressive studies on the impact of sleep deprivation on the brain came out last year. And it's basically that, think of sleep like a dishwasher. It cleans all the toxics that accumulate in your brain during the day. So if you don't clean them up, you have a cognitive impairment equivalent to being drunk, and also, long-term, it leads to Alzheimer's. The connection now between sleep deprivation and Alzheimer's is stunning. So that's the other thing. The brain is number one. Our health is number two. We're moving into a period when everybody's getting colds. Sleep dramatically improves our immunity and reduces the genes that lead to inflammation.
And so, I mean, I grew up with under the spectre of Margaret Thatcher, who famously only needed, or always said that she only needed 5 hours sleep. Is that an anomaly? Is it possible to survive on 5 hours sleep and do a great job? Or is that ridiculous?
So, if you have the genetic mutation that means you can survive on little sleep and thrive and do well, then yes. But only 1% of the population is what scientists call short sleepers. And you can test yourselves. It's a genetic mutation. You can't make yourselves require less sleep. You can't train yourselves, because we are also driven by will and we can make that happen. You can't make that happen. Now, there is now a kind of gene editing. So you could theoretically gene edit the embryo. So before the baby is born, if any parent here wishes that their children had slept less when they were babies, there is a way to do that through gene editing. But basically, it's out of our hands once we are born.
Okay, so let me ask for another show of hands here. Who in the last 2 months has taken a red-eye back from the West Coast? Okay, so quite a few people, because I think that for people who travel a lot for work, taking a red-eye back feels like one of those very efficient ways of saving time, but in fact, you talk about it in your book.
Well, the reason it's not is because it makes us less effective the next day, and it makes us more likely to get sick, and it makes us also less joyful. And John, I need to stress that, because I discovered that at the beginning I started adding sleep in my life through discipline and certain practices, like turning off my devices 30 minutes before I was going to go to sleep and charging them outside my bedroom. But gradually, what makes me now make sleep a non-negotiable priority is the fact that I no longer like myself the way I am when I'm sleep deprived. I don't like how reactive I become. I don't like how I'm in this kind of mental fog. And I don't like the fact that I don't enjoy my life. And as Bill Clinton famously said, the most important mistakes I made when I was tired.
Right.
Now, he did not specify what mistakes, but we can all
He may have been in bed.
He may have
been in bed.
Oh, that's the other thing. Incidentally, sleep deprivation leads to both infertility and erectile dysfunction. So sleep can actually be an alternative to Viagra, you know.
Should I ask for a show of hands of who here's got erectile dysfunction? No, I'm not going to do that.
But you know, it's what you say, how people don't promote something that's free. Sex is free, sleep is free. So we promote just about everything to give us beauty, make us healthier, make us more potent, but there's something in our hands that we are in control of that can do all these things. Beauty is another huge thing. You know, believe it or not, they've done studies on how sleep deprivation increases wrinkles and lines by 45%.
Oh my God.
You know, blemishes, redness, all the things we use all these products to try and mitigate.
So what are the symptoms if you're working in an office, and I think we all know people that we all have colleagues who can seem short-tempered or who can make irrational decisions. How do you know that they are suffering sleep deprivation? What are the symptoms? You talked about not feeling joy, but when you're observing it in someone else, what are the symptoms? I think,
you know, hostility, anger, overreacting to everything, taking things personally. And what is interesting is that we can turn it around very quickly. I mean, just getting a little more sleep every day can change all those dynamics. So if you scratch the surface, actually, underneath a lot of mental health issues, you find sleep deprivation. That's why when the book comes out in April, I'm focusing on colleges, because I want to be able to reach millennials, to help them realize they don't have to make the mistakes our generation made. They don't have to believe the collective delusion that burnout is the way to succeed. And Joanna, you and I were talking about the casualties of 2015, all these executives collapsing with heart attacks or even dying on their treadmills, because high-powered executives, like many in the room, have now absolutely believed in the need for exercise and movement and good nutrition. But the third leg of the stool is sleep, and we have a way to go there.
Right. So let's talk also about driving when you're tired. Who here, let's have a show of hands again, who here has driven when they knew they were exhausted or tired? Okay, this is a very responsible audience, by the way, but there are a few renegades.
Well, actually, that's a major issue, because we need to increase awareness around drowsy driving. Actually, we're doing a campaign with Uber in the spring. The way we changed awareness around drunken driving with the designated driver campaign, now drowsy driving accidents are close to drunken driving accidents. Over 300,000 a year.
300,000
a year, and 6,400 fatal. So we have a long way to go, and men are much more likely to get behind the wheel when they're tired, because again, it's the macho thing. I had dinner with a guy recently who bragged that he had only gotten 4 hours sleep the night before, and I felt like saying, but I didn't say it, you know what, if you had gotten 5, this dinner would have been a lot more interesting.
And talk a little bit about how, because I'm sure there are lots of people in the audience who, like me, believe that sleep is fungible. And, you know, I get up first thing in the morning, I check my email, last thing at night I check my email, and I don't actually like the process of powering down and being disconnected. I like being connected, and I don't feel it takes over my life. But when I read the book, And again, I read it with great skepticism. I thought, well, there's no way this is going to change how I do things. And I actually have found it has. Will you talk a little bit about routines for people to get into to enable them to sleep better?
Well, our relationship with technology is key because everybody here is wired, and everybody here knows approximately how much battery remains on your smartphone right now. And if it gets below like 13%, we begin to get anxious and look around for a recharging shrine. But we don't think that about ourselves. And so we need to change that. We need to recognize that the only way for us to recharge is to unplug from our devices temporarily. And the key here, the most important thing, I mean, there's tons of tools and techniques in the book, but the most important is charging our devices outside our bedroom. Because what happens to many of us is we fall asleep because we're exhausted, but we haven't gone through the process of slowing down our brains. So they wake us up in the middle of the night, and then we can't go back to sleep. And if our phone is by our bed, we are going to be tempted to take it and start looking at emails and texts, and then our daily lives with all the challenges and problems invade our nightlife, and it gets even harder to fall asleep. And then we go to work tired, and we've all done that, and it's a terrible feeling when we drag ourselves from meeting to meeting. And kind of, I remember once seeing a table at the end of a boardroom, and I thought, if I go and crawl under this table and fall asleep, will anybody notice? I'm sure everybody here at some point has had that feeling of being bone tired, and we can avoid it. But the relationship with our technology is key. Incidentally, multitasking doesn't exist. So anytime we think we can relax and be on our phones, or we can listen and be on our phones, it doesn't really exist. Modern science has shown that it's task switching, and it's one of the most stressful things we do.
Well, and actually, as we're at the MPA conference, I've always thought that, you know, when I was growing up, the point of getting a magazine was to feel plugged in to what was going on in the culture. And we heard that from Tamron Hall last night, who presented the Asmis, who grew up in a small town in Texas, and who talked about how the magazine, receiving a magazine, made her feel connected. Now I think people feel connected through their devices, and a magazine is the perfect thing with which to unplug. So perhaps we could do a campaign of reading a magazine before you go to sleep.
Absolutely. Actually, that would be great. Instead of having devices on your nightstand, have magazines, have real books. Actually, that would be a great campaign. The other campaign you and I are going to do is on nightstands, because Joanna has made this completely accurate point that in America, people put much more attention on their coffee tables and their living rooms and much less on their nightstands. So let's change that. Let's create beautiful nightstands that draw us in when we are ready to go to bed and have no devices on them.
Well, and one of my thoughts was that because the bedroom isn't a place that you invite, well, hopefully strangers into, but because the bedroom is one of those rooms that actually guests to your home don't see, it gets less attention than people's living rooms or their tabletops in their dining room, and so it gets neglected because it's just about you or your partner or your husband or whatever. And I feel that they are places we could probably make nicer and make more indulgent, which would be more fun to spend time in.
Yeah, I love the kind of metaphor of the samurai. Like when the samurai enter a tea room, which was like the sacred space, they leave their swords outside. So I see it a little bit like that. It's like our devices are our swords, are the way we communicate, we make decisions. When we enter the sacred space of our bedroom, which is our time to refuel and recharge and return to the arena, operating at our best, we leave our devices outside. Athletes are now ahead of business people because they see the difference that sleep has made in their performance. So when I did an e-course with Oprah, my guest teacher on sleep was Kobe Bryant. And yesterday at the Huffington Post, we did a video about sleep with Andre Iguodala from the Golden State Warriors, who changed his sleep routine, and he can actually demonstrate with data, because he wears a Jawbone app like I am, that measures how much sleep you get and how it improved his performance, including reducing his fouls by 50%, et cetera, et cetera. So this is very data-driven. That's what I love about it, that you can actually measure the impact on performance, on productivity, on depression, on anxiety, on all these things that are that plague modern life.
So you came to write Thrive, your book about sort of wellness, and then the sleep revolution through your own particular, something happened to you specifically.
Yes.
Many people in the room probably know that, but for the people who don't, remind us of that story.
Well, basically in 2007, 2 years into building the Huffington Post, I collapsed from sleep deprivation, exhaustion, burnout, broke my cheekbone. And that started me in the process of redefining what success is, writing Thrive. When I went around the world talking about Thrive, the thing that most people wanted to talk about was sleep. Because people may not want to meditate, they may not want to do a lot of the other things, but everybody has a relationship with sleep. And so that's what got me looking at the history, the science, the mystery. The history is amazing. Up until the first industrial revolution, we actually saw sleep as the way to the sacred, to richer dimensions of life. After the first industrial revolution, we started looking at sleep as something that we had to do away with because it was an obstacle to being like a machine. We wanted to make human beings like machines. We wanted to eliminate downtime. And then with the third industrial revolution of our connection to technology, it got worse because we never leave the office. The office comes with us. Mm-hmm. But now, you know, in Davos, I was telling you, Joanna, in Davos, the theme this year was the fourth industrial revolution. And what is interesting is that the fourth industrial revolution is all about automation, constant connectivity, accelerated speed. And during that time, actually, human beings are more important than ever because the functions that are easy have been taken over by machines. So what's left is who can be the most creative, who can attract the best talent and retain them. And all these things now have to do who is operating at their best. So performance enhancers are becoming more and more important. People who can deal with change and be resilient are becoming more and more valued. So that's why kind of the fourth industrial revolution in a way meets the sleep revolution. And we can put human beings back at the center in their fullness and not just treat them like automata.
So one of the things, I mean, I love the idea that you're presenting this and trying to change the work culture by making it more about performance. And it's brilliant to get Kobe Bryant and people like that on board to talk about that. How do you, and I'm sure there are many people in this room who are parents of teenagers, and I wrestle with this nightly, how on earth do you counteract the impact of binge watching? Having to physically wrestle the computer out of one of my teenage son's hands every night is such a chore. It's a great bore, and yet I understand the sort of black hole that he goes into of watching show after show. How can one counteract that? What are good practical steps? Because for me to say to him, please start charging your phone outside the door, is met with utter derision.
Well, first of all, we need to role model it. Believe it or not, so many of us as parents say that to our children, but we don't model it. So we can say no devices at the dinner table, and then surreptitiously we're looking at an important message from the office. Or we binge watch something, and children notice what we're doing much more than what we are saying.
Oh, so it's my fault. It's my
It's
fault.
totally
Always
your
blame
fault.
the parent.
Well, we need to partly blame the parents, but also we need to make it very clear to them, give them the data. Millennials are very data-driven. And this is not about what you are saying or I'm saying, it's about what science and data are saying and if they love sports, what athletes are doing. I mean, if they love tennis, Roger Federer at Wimbledon gets 2 houses, one for his family and one for him, because he cannot be disturbed before a game day. He's got to get his full 11 to 12 hours sleep in his case.
Oh, good.
Incidentally, most people need 7 to 9, don't worry. Depending on what sport they like, you can give them examples. There are examples from every sport of what athletes are now doing to perform at their best. The other thing we need to do is change the start times of school. It's absolutely insane that school starts as early as it does. And now the Academy of Pediatricians has come out and asked school districts to change the times because the circadian rhythms of teenagers are different than ours, so they actually are going to go to bed later. Therefore, why start school at 8?
Well, that would lead us on to a completely different session, the circadian rhythm of teenagers. It's too worrying, but the good news is the science is really compelling, and Ariana has made available for everybody, and you should have it on your seat, a copy of her new book. So please thank her very much with me, Ariana Huffington.
Thank you.